We are at the end of March, and I finished reading Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart. Um, this book has two different plays in them, both by Larry Kramer. So the second one will be read soon as well. But The Normal Heart by Larry Kramer, um, I believe, put out in 1985, um, and is focused on the AIDS crisis. Um, this play is really interesting because of America's response to the AIDS crisis, the AIDS epidemic, which is to say there was none. Um, you know, 1985, Ronald Reagan finally says that there is an epidemic going on and that it is a top priority for his administration. 1986, part of his budget for the next fiscal year proposes a decrease in the budget towards finding a solution, right? So that's really kind of where we're at in this, at the time that this is being published in. In terms of the play itself, it's interesting because it is such a direct translation from real life into fictional. Ned Weeks is a very much a stand-in for Larry Kramer and what was happening in New York at the time. The play mostly centers around kind of this organization that is attempting to raise money and attempting to start the fight in getting awareness and finding a solution for the epidemic. And just the internalized political struggles that are going on along the way, because so much of this is, I think, really focused on this idea that gay communities at this point in time have an image problem. And what Ned wants to do is to show gay communities in a positive light, and that gay people are just as much about a part of everyday life as everyone else, right? He wants Bruce, who is one of the major heads at Citibank, to be open and come out of the closet. He wants everyone to be open and be out, and the way that he is, and he thinks in doing that, it will create a better image of what gay people look like, and then therefore allow them to receive more funding and more support. Which I certainly understand this kind of directive, right? Basically, what the argument is that in order to be initially accepted into the predominant culture, you have to become the predominant culture. And this is a fight that we still see going on today, not only in gay communities and queer communities, but also in that's the really big argument for why a lot of conservative rural people don't like cities and don't like people who happen to be a different color than them. And it is because of this, they don't fit the culture of America, whatever that means. And really what people are saying when they say that is that they don't like people who are different than them, because there's a belief that the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Catholic, whatever it is is somehow the representation of what America should be, which is not the case, right? But for really what Ned seems to be kind of drawing at is that in order for the gay community to have any sort of fighting chance at being accepted and therefore getting any sort of funding and research done for AIDS, they have to at least be that for a while. And really, that, I mean, that's kind of like the long argument that constantly occurs throughout this is, why can no one else be out except for Ned? And really, I think the big thing that comes down to is just the idea of, well, look at the situation that Ned is in. Ned is in the arts. He is a writer, and he is working effectively freelance, and so he doesn't have to worry about what others think of him in terms of his life, because no one else holds power over him, compared to people like Bruce or people like Hiram and Mickey, in which all of these people are gay, but they also have some sort of situation in which being openly gay would somehow cost them their livelihood. And so they stay closeted because it is the only way for them to have a life, right? I just think like that's kind of one of the big things. It also, I think, really kind of develops who this play is written for. This play really seems to be written for the people that are like Mickey and Bruce and Hiram and people like that, who have some sort of upstanding role in society but are closeted gays. And the reason I think that is not only because like we have this kind of constant struggle in which we as the audience are forced to see from Ned's perspective and be on Ned's side, but then also there's a pretty consistent idea of everyone else being the other, which I believe I've talked about previously at some points. But in terms of like this, it proposes that lesbians are others. They're surprised anytime that there's any sort of woman support for the organization. There's this idea that people who are really into kink and express that are the other. There's this idea that they use the term transvestite, but there's this idea that people who are trans are different. They're the others. They're not gay people. They're something else. And so, right, like there's this kind of immediate marketing thing inside the play itself, which is like, this is a play for the heteronormative gay community, and encouraging this community to be out and then also support the gay community instead of trying to act heteronormatively. So that's that. There's something about this play that is like, the foreword for this, the introduction for this, has a section from Tony Kushner, in which he basically describes the play as being incredibly plain and straightforward in the sense, and it's both an insult and a compliment, because on one hand, it feels very much like a kind of high school written dialogue at times, in which like you're writing this for health class and you need to get these points in. And so like it sometimes just feels like you're just name dropping and you're listing and you're listing and you're listing. And so on one hand, it feels kind of a very dry sort of way sometimes, but also it's very plain in the sense that it's by doing this tactic of just listing shit sometimes and like listing real world things, it's calling out the inaction, right? It's saying, look, here is where the statistics are from, and I'm going to put it on display for everyone here to see, and then ask, well, why aren't you doing anything about it? Right? So it's kind of like plainness feeds into itself in a couple different ways, of just this directness and plainness. On one hand, makes it feel very dry at times, but also makes it very clear that like we're calling out organizations, we're calling out inaction from U.S. government. Trying to think of anything else for this. Other big thing is this kind of constant fight between what is promiscuity and what does it mean in terms of the gay community, because Ned, who is the stand-in for Larry Kramer, really kind of takes the stance of like that promiscuity and is somehow not worthy of existing, and really criticizes a lot of the unseen characters in this, about how terrible it is that this is a part of queer life, right? And to an extent, I agree, right? Like that, like promiscuity and queerness should not go hand in hand, right? You should not have to be promiscuous in order to be seen as queer or be seen as gay. But certainly the way in which it is shown, I think, really is just very much a continuation of this. We need to insert moralistic values and heteronormative ideas into queerness so that we can be accepted. Let's see, anything else? That was really my big thoughts. I guess the final thing to note is that there's a scene in here in which they're talking about promiscuity again, and I believe it's Tommy, it might be Mickey, that says, it is my right to kill myself however I want. And Ned says back something along the lines of, then you can kill yourself, but don't kill others with you. Something along those lines. I know I'm not getting the lines right. But it really kind of, I think, forms the foundation of this concept in which when you're in a community that has had a sexual revolution, like the queer community at this time, the gay community at this time, you're looking at this kind of like STDs and STIs are just a part of life. And now that we have an STD that will kill you, whether you like it or not, and there's no cure for it, Now we have the question of what is my responsibility as a person to inform my partners of this. And from modern perspective, it seems very clear, right, that from a moralistic perspective, because we should inform partners. But at this time, right, in the 1980s, you're just getting to the beginnings of acceptance of gayness and queerness, and being able to be open, and you're effectively ostracizing yourself if you admit this and admit that you have HIV/AIDS. And so, from a very personal point of view, right, and a very selfish point of view, like I understand it, but at the same time, I agree with Ned very much on this point of just like, just because that you have and you are willing to die for something does not mean that you get to choose to kill others for it. So that's that. It really, I think, right, eventually there's a lawsuit somewhere, or a court case somewhere. I don't remember the court case. I don't remember if it got set, what the outcome of it is. But basically, one person sued someone they had sex with because the person they had sex with had given them HIV/AIDS, and so really it was like, the argument was basically that you have killed me by having sex with me, because at that point there is no cure. PrEP, I think, was still a number of years away. And so that's what the lawsuit was of, if you have an infection that is fatal and you have sex with someone and they then contract it, does that make you legally responsible for their death, right? I don't remember the court case. I don't remember it, other than those facts. But yeah, that was Throw 'em Heart by Larry Kramer. Yeah.